Okay, greetings chess fans. This is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and today we're going to take a look at one of my games again. Sorry about that, those of you who are hoping for more readers' games, but we'll get back to those. Don't worry, that'll be a regular thing. But for now, we're going to return to quote-unquote regular shows. And I think, though, that you guys will like this, not just because of the high-class commentary that you're receiving. I'm being a little facetious. But also because we're going to look at an opening here that is the bane of many an amateur player, and that's the Stonewall, with a small eye on the collie as well. And this game was a kind of a rapid game of sorts. It was played in an ICC Dos Hermanos qualifier back in 2003. My opponent's Frederick Newman, and actually I think this game is in the databases, unfortunately. So I like to keep my games out of the databases for the most part, just to hide stuff. But actually, there's nothing really to hide in this game. I can improve on my opening play from here. And the game as a whole, I think, is quite a nice one. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm black, d4, knight f6. Okay, we'll come back to tilling in a second. e3, d5, bishop d3, c5, c3, e6. I have no idea why I played this so passively. Knight d2. Knight b to d7, and f4. Okay, so here we have our position, and there are several ways in which I'd like to offer for black to improve on what I've done so far. Well, my position's not so bad, and really nothing really terrible happened to me, and I was quickly able to equalize and even gain an advantage. But nevertheless, I don't really like the way I've played this thus far. And also, instead of f4, if white plays knight g to f3, this goes into a kind of a mainline collie, the Koltanowski system, as opposed to the Zukertort version of the collie with b3. And here, let's say the typical way for the game to go, certainly in amateur play, is something like this: bishop to d6, both sides castle, white plays rook to e1, and then gets in a quick e4. So some possible moves: queen c7, e4. It's good to play c takes d4 most of the time, just to give white this isolated d pawn. Though sometimes with the queen on c7, maybe white can take advantage of the open c file. So that can be a double-edged decision. Anyway, c takes d4, takes, and now here black has three responsible options. The kind of automatic move, which makes me a little bit worried, is knight takes e4. Because after rook takes e4, I mean, white's really ready to go here on the king side. I mean, this rook can come to g4 or to h4, and knight comes to g5, the queen comes to h5, and just really quickly, kind of frighteningly quickly, white can whip up crushing kingside attack. So I wouldn't really recommend that, at least not unless you've done some serious work on it. A better try, I think, is knight to d5. And I'm not sure if white is anything better than grabbing the bishop here with knight d6, queen d6. And as I mentioned, white does have the bishop here, but black has a reasonable position. The knight on d5 is very solid. He's going to play b6 and bishop to b7. So as long as he is careful about the kingside tactics, everything should be okay. And there's no bishop takes h7 check to worry about here, because king takes, knight g5, king goes back, queen comes to h5. Black can put a knight on f6, and that takes care of everything. So this is another possibility. And then finally, maybe the most interesting move is bishop to f4. And at least in principle, I like this a lot. White is going to have to exchange a couple of minor pieces here, and he doesn't get access to as many kingside squares as he would like to. So this could go knight f6, and then knight e5. That's probably the best that white can do. Takes, rook takes, queen d6, and maybe white still has some small chances for an edge here, but it's not too bad. I mean, I think this is pretty reasonable for black at this point. However, going back to the position after knight g to f3, I'd like to propose a different setup for you, and one that I've had a pretty good, pretty fair amount of success with over the years, and that's to play b6 with the idea of bishop to b7 and knight e4. And the big point, of course, is that if white doesn't even get an e4, he's really got nothing in these Kali systems. So castles, bishop to b7, say queen to e2, bishop e7, and we want to castle and play castle first before we play knight to e4. If white plays e4 here, though, we don't mind, because takes, and now again we don't want to make all the exchanges because that gives white's queen access to e4. So knight e4, I think, is not best. So takes, and white's queen is very well centralized here. And okay, black's going to play knight to f6 at some point, but even that's really not that great because then white's knight gets to go to e5 and sit there forever. So, it's not that white has really anything special here, but this is more than he deserves. So I would say just castle here. Rook to d1 is not a bad move, kind of hinting at some dangers along this line. So you can see, for example, some variation like takes. And if black plays knight c5, then knight c5, and then bishop takes h7 check, and the queen drops. So that would be the idea there. For that reason, queen c7 is quite sensible. All right, bishop to g5, trying to take advantage of the bishop on e7 being loose. And here, kind of an interesting idea is c4. And on bishop to c2, rook f to e8. So now everything is kind of safe and secure. And this pawn on c4, I mean, sometimes that can be bad in some positions, but here it's actually not too bad. And in fact, we'll see a somewhat similar idea and structure in the game. Anyway, this particular position, I think black is doing quite well. Certainly I wouldn't say he's better, but I think it's probably equal or very, very close, and probably just equal. Okay, but let's go back a ways here. All right, so here instead of... all right, so here, e6 I think is premature. And I'm not really sure why I played it. Maybe it was early in the morning, or I just hadn't faced a Kali in a while. But I would now greatly prefer knight c6. And, okay, the threat's to play e5. So white should do something about this. And, of course, he has two options, a Kali option and a Stonewall option. All right, so let's take a look at the Kali first. If knight f3. Okay, now we can play e6, and this is going to be kind of similar. There can be some differences. And actually here, I'm not really sure if I like this better than the knight b to d7 line. So actually, it's kind of a push. So dc, bishop c5, e4. And though here I think is an important move. So as long as you play this, I think black is okay. Taking on e4 twice, I think, will give white a slight advantage. But queen c7 I kind of like. And then on queen to e2, h6, keeping some white pieces off of the g5 square. And here I think black is still okay. e5 is not really so good because the knight to g4, and that wins a pawn. So this position I think is fine for black. Okay, going back to knight c6. Oops, if white tries to stonewall it with f4, now I think bishop to g4 is a good move. Say knight f3, e6, castles. And here a little trick that you should know about. It's bishop to d6. Now, of course, white can avoid this trick, but I'm not sure that there's any really very convenient way for him to do so. Now, white wants to play knight to e5 at some point, and along those lines, knight b to d2 is the very natural way to get there. And the queen's going to move out of the way, or white will play h3, bishop f3, knight f3, and then go for knight e5. However, when this knight on d2 is blocking the bishop on c1, if you've got a bishop on d6, or let's say a queen on c7, some piece that's hitting this f4 pawn, black has the neat little idea, c takes d4. Because in the Kali, white always, well, Kali or the Stonewall, white almost always wants to play e takes d4, which increases his advantage, his control over the e5 square, and also simultaneously keeps the queen side under control. Because c takes d4, black plays rook c8, and you can see his pieces are ready to kind of go jumping in. And if a3, then that weakens some light squares, so black will play knight to a5 and queen b6 and so on after castling. So e takes d4 would be the natural way to play, but it hangs the f pawn. Bishop takes f4. So I kind of think that this is a good way to face the Stonewall. Going back, though, even further, let me propose knight c6 here. And in fact, this goes back to either the late 90s or very early 2000s, when man versus machine matches were still pretty common and fairly balanced. So, players with white like to play the Stonewall because the computer wouldn't really have a clue positionally what to do about it. The board would get all locked up, and that would leave the computer not really playing its best kind of chess. So the programmers for the computer, of course, had to find ways of preventing this plan from taking effect. And this move, knight c6 on move 3, is really quite a nifty way to do that. Okay, again, the point is to play e5. And if white plays c3, e5, there we go. And if f4, now black has knight to b4, funny enough. And now the idea is, of course, he's going to try to exchange off the bishop. And if the bishop runs away someplace, say it goes back to e2, or he plays bishop b5 check, c6, bishop to a4. And all these lines, black will bring the bishop to f5 or to g4. And first of all, solve all of his basic problems in the Stonewall, excuse me. And the board won't be quite so locked up. So black will get active piece play in these lines. And the knight will come to e4 and so on. So this, I think, is quite a good way to play. Okay, going back to move 1 even now. If you're a d5 player, that gives you some extra options. So knight f3, knight f6, e3. Well, here you don't have to wait around for bishop to d3 or figure out how to combat it. You can just play bishop to f5 straight away. And if white plays bishop to d3, can very happily exchange. One thing to watch out for is just the one simple tactic of queen to b5 check. So just play c6, and everything's under control. And this exchange of light squared bishops favors you. So now you'll play like a regular semi-Slav. e6, knight to d7, bishop to d6, castle, and in due course play either c5 or e5. Better e5 if you can play it. And in fact, then you're really the person who's playing the Kali with colors reversed. Sometimes white players will play c takes d3 instead. And I don't think there's really anything special about this. I think it's just a way of coping with the loss of their strong light squared bishop. Black just plays c6 again, castles e6, and again the same kind of development. Here you may not be able to get e5 in as easily, but c5, well, c5 or e5 once again will be the plan, and black has just no problems whatsoever in this position. So instead of bishop to d3, white should play c4, and now after c6, knight c3, e6, knight h4, we've transposed into a Slav variation. That's pretty good for black. Not great. I mean, it's a main line. When I say not great, I don't mean that that white has some special advantage, but I would say this is a line where overall, generally speaking, black does slightly better than in the absolute main lines. But basically, it's the same kind of thing. White sometimes gets an advantage, black will often equalize, but it's a fundamentally sound position, and one that I think you need not worry too much about, though you should study. Should give it a bit of study. Okay, so let's turn to the game now and quickly review the moves. So d4, knight f6, e3, d5, bishop d3, c5, and then I played e6, and here f4. Okay, so here I played b6, and we'll take a look and we'll see if the plan that I had worked basically to perfection. But couple of things to be considered. One is that I think white could have improved in some fundamental way over what he chose in the game, and also here just to remind you that this bishop to d6 idea is possible, because again, if knight to f3, black gets to make this nice exchange on d4, and again, white's forced to recapture with the c pawn, because if e takes d4, the f pawn hangs. So here white has two moves that are okay. Knight h3, protecting the f-pawn, so c takes d4, e takes d4 is no big deal. And relatedly, queen to f3. Here black can renew the threat with queen to c7, and white renews the defensive f4 with knight to h3. And it just goes from here. So black can play b6, bishop b7, but another benefit of this variation is that white now has three guys attacking the e4 square. So it's much harder for black to get in knight to e4 because he's just going to lose a pawn on the triple capture. And not perfectly sufficient compensation. So, bishop to d6 I think is not bad, but it's maybe not a panacea. Okay, so I played b6, and since bishop to d6 doesn't really doesn't really allow me to get what I want with white's best play, I think b6 is a little bit better. It's a little sneakier, gives white the chance to make what might be the wrong move, and in fact it's what he did. He played knight g to f3. And now bishop to b7, and since queen to c2 here isn't very logical, I'm going to get my knight to e4 in after all. So what should white have played instead? Well, queen f3, bishop to b7, knight h3, and alright, again, I mean, I think black has nothing to panic about in this position, but maybe white is, I don't know if white has a pull, but white is at least getting what he wanted to from the opening. So he's managed to keep me off of e4. On the other hand, he hasn't gotten to put a piece on e5 himself, but alright, he's at least achieved some basic goals in the position. My light square bishop is, for the moment at least, locked out of play, and I can't get knight e4 in. Maybe for that reason, black should play something like rook to c8 here, and the idea being rook to c7, queen to a8, and going for knight to e4. That might be the case, and maybe white will play knight to f2 to really make the point that he is not going to allow me to play the knight to e4. And I have to be a little bit careful about castling kingside because, you know, he'll have castled, he can play g4, g5, and whip up some attacking chances. So here I think white has reasonable play, and for this reason I would recommend deviating earlier. Alright, all worked out well though. He played knight g to f3. I should also mention in that position, so from here, that maybe black should also consider playing queen c7 and then castling queenside. So another idea, and that might be a better way to handle the king situation. And especially if white castles kingside, then black might be able to turn the tables with something like h6, g5, prepared properly, and trying to open lines over there. Alright, so again back to the game. Knight g to f3, bishop to b7, queen e2, and now just in time before he can play e4 himself, knight to e4. And here I think the position is safely equal for black. I think once this has been achieved, black really has nothing to worry about. Well, okay, I mean, something could happen at some point down the road, but basically black has fundamentally solved his problems in this position. Alright, white castled, I played bishop to e7, he played knight to e5, and I castled. And it might look as if this is just a really dull, equal position. I've got a knight on e4, he's got a knight on e5. You know, what's gonna happen here? But I don't think it's quite so simple. I mean, maybe the position is still about equal, though possibly I'm getting close to an edge here. But the big difference is that he can't kick my knight, and I can sure as heck kick his with f6. So this seemingly small but really significant difference, I think, does give me some chances for an edge. And after queen to f3, I think I do have an edge. Now, I could play f5, ironically enough, but this, I think, would be a tougher slog. I think I'm a little bit better here because I think I have more options thanks to my queenside space. So I can play some kind of queenside pawn ruler like c4, b5, a4, b4, and so on. Something like this, in fact, happens in the game. But, you know, I would have preferred to first get rid of this central problem, and that's what I did. Now, how do I want to do this, though? Because if I play f6, maybe he plays the knight back to g4 and then f2. And my knight on d7 is a little bit out of play. It's kind of a superfluous knight here. I mean, really, I'm happier if I just have the one knight on e4. So for that reason, I played knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, knight f6. So first I'm going to get my knight to e4, and only then will I kick his knight out with f6. And I think doing that is going to give me an edge. Now here you should probably play queen h3, I play knight to e4. Well, I still think I have chances for an edge here. But this is probably his best. In the game he played knight to g4, and I guess he decided that he didn't want to trade his light squared bishop for my knight. But I just think this is a wrong-headed approach. So I played knight to e4, and I mean, it's true. I don't think he does want to make this exchange of the bishop for the knight, but he's got to do something about it. He plays rook a to d1, and now I play f5. And the point here is that, okay, if he plays knight e5, now I'll play bishop to f6, and I'll swap that off at my leisure. And the key thing is that I'm getting to keep my knight on e4. So I decided at this point, my dark squared bishop is really biting on granite. Nominally speaking, I mean, it's actually kind of a funny position here. Nominally speaking, my dark squared bishop is a good bishop, quote unquote, because it's not, none of my central pawns, well, the c5 pawn, but no other pawn, my e6 pawn, my d5 pawn aren't in its way. The center pawns aren't in the bishop's way. Well, the bishop on b7 is the quote unquote bad bishop. But as we'll see, it's quite logical for me to swap off the dark squared bishop for his knight, getting rid of his best piece, and getting rid of a piece of mine that really isn't going to be able to do very much work for quite a while, and getting rid of his best piece. Okay, so knight f2, another decision here, but now he's kind of taking this fundamentally passive stance. His knight is never going to get to e5 now. As we'll see, taking on e4 isn't really a good idea either, and now I take over the initiative completely. So the first stage of the game, I was able to fulfill my strategic goal of putting a knight on e4 and making sure he doesn't get to keep a knight on e5, and now I get to start doing things. And what I'm going to do is utilize the side of the board where I have more space. Now, I could try something like king h8 and rook g8 and g5, trying to create some kind of kingside play, but that's a bit iffier, and frankly, the kingside is relatively balanced, at least comparatively balanced. On the queen side, though, I think I just have a nice, clean space advantage, and I don't have to worry about any counterplay on his part. So I played c4, which I think is a good move. Bishop b1, b5, queen e2, a5. All right, so now he feels like he's done what he needs to do to keep his pieces safe, and he plays knight takes e4. All right, quick question here. Which way should I recapture? Okay, well, hopefully the answer is clear to you. D takes e4 is the right way. And the reason for this is that if f takes e4, well, there's two reasons. So one is that if f takes e4, now I'm giving him a pawn majority on the king side, and that in some way encourages him to try to scrape up some play over there. Now, granted, it's very difficult to see how exactly he's going to achieve anything substantive over there. I'll give you that point. But I don't even want to have to worry about that. There's no reason for me to even consider giving him even the smallest glimmer of play. And this little extra space that he gets now with maybe queen to g4. Okay, so again, I mean, I don't think I have anything to worry about, but this is just giving him a little bit of room that he just doesn't deserve. And notice that I'm not really keeping his bishop locked out of the game by doing this, because, I mean, it'll take some time, but he can move the rook and play bishop c2, d1, and so on, and get the bishop to a decent square at some point. So it's not permanent. If it was permanent that his bishop could just never get out anywhere, then that might be a factor worth considering. But here it's less clear. So I think I'm better after f takes e4 as well, most likely, but I want to keep everything just about the queen side. So d takes e4 I think does a better job. It also shuts his bishop out even more seriously, because now even if it gets to d1, so what? It's not doing anything there. Furthermore, and this is the next big point, I'm going to put this bishop, this so-called bad bishop, on d5, and in fact it's going to be magnificent. And I don't mean that it's just going to be a glorified pawn shoring up the structure, but in fact it's going to do positive and important things in the game, as you will see. So stay tuned. Okay, now here white could have tried a4, hoping with this little free time he's got to mess up my structure on the queen side. But in fact, because I've got so much extra space over there, this is really nothing. It might even help me in some ways. So I would play bishop to d5, and after a takes b5, either queen to b6 or rook to b8. I'm not sure which I prefer, but in any case, probably queen to b6. I'm just going to regain the pawn. I'll have pressure on b2, and I'm going to play a4, a3, and eventually just the whole queen side will be opened up, and opened up for my pieces, because I've got more space there, and also because I get to control the timing the a3 break, and it's not really, it's far from obvious what it is that white's going to do in the meantime to try to distract me or otherwise thwart my plans. In the game, my opponent played b3, and this practically forces me to make a move that I wanted to make anyway, bishop to d5. So now I'm threatening his b3 pawn. I'm also threatening, or I'm not threatening, but I can meet b takes c4 with bishop takes c4 and win the exchange. That's obviously not a good thing for him. And already you can see that this bishop on d5 is going to prove quite difficult for white to cope with. Okay, he plays bishop to c2, which is a good move, reasonable move. Protects the pawn and also clears the first rank for his rooks to come across and help defend. Alright, I played queen to c7. He played rook f to e8. And now, what should black play? So here it's time to come up with a plan. Practically all of my pieces are on outstanding locations, and it's time to think about what to do to make genuine progress at this moment. Okay, well, the answer that I came up with was b4, and I think this is a good move. And I'm opening up the position. I'm not going to let him lock it up. And with the huge amount of extra space I've got, so much the better. And I'm doing it before his rooks can come to squares like c1, where they can pose some potential questions to my queen. So here, if white takes on b4, I play c3. He's got to go back. And now you see that the rooks are still shut out. So a takes b4, threatening the pawn on a2. So this guy is now under attack. So white has to play the ridiculous bishop to b1. And you can see, with all of his pieces just going backward, he's not going to be very happy. So rook f to c8 with the amusingly sadistic threat of c2. Queen c2. And here figure out what black should do to push white over that last little cliff to his death. Metaphorically speaking, of course. So what is it that black to move ought to play? Well, the answer is this. Black should bring the bishop back to c6 or b7 with the idea of bishop to a6 and then bishop to d3. And that'll break the barricade there, cost white the exchange, and, well, more than the exchange, because even after rook d3, e d3, queen d3, once again, c2. So this idea should win the game for black pretty comfortably. Okay. So c takes b4 is no path to salvation, and white played rook to c1, which I think is a good try. Now here, I think the only real mistake, and it's not even a big mistake, but the only inaccuracy that I can really point to after the opening questions is here. So I played maybe the second best move, but I had an even more elegant move than what I chose. So what I played was b takes c3, bishop takes c3, and then bishop to a3. And I'm clearly better after this, and it's a good way to go. But even nicer was a4. And it's just such a pretty move, too, that I'm sorry that I didn't play it. So this succeeds in blasting the queen side open and would have saved some time, as well as, again, been very good for the aesthetic effect. Alright, so instead I played bc, bishop c3, bishop to a3. And here, white should play rook to b1 and just keep holding grimly on as best he can. Maybe he thought that c takes b3 was lethal, but what he missed, I think. Let me see if I've got this. Remember this correctly? Oh no, okay, right. So I think white plays rook takes b3 here. No, does this work? No, this doesn't work. Cause yeah. Never mind that. So bishop b3, queen c3, and now, okay. Oh, right, that's it. Okay. Bishop takes d5, e takes d5, rook to b3. So that's what white has to save his material. So, okay, it's very easy to miss something like that. Clearly, I just had to refigure it out for myself here. And so that's why he decided to sack the exchange right away. He just missed that, which, again, is, especially in a rapid game, is very easy to miss. So instead of c takes b3, black should probably just play rook f to c8. And, again, with a clear advantage, more space, genuine threats. But thanks to that miracle defense, at least white's still kicking. And also for this reason, a4 is better. So if I had seen all of this, if I had seen that neat trick with rook to b3, maybe I would have kept looking and considered a4, I'm not sure. But at any rate, so this was the one thing that I had missed in the game that made a4 a better move. Okay, well, my opponent didn't see this either, and he played b takes c4, and now it's just a winning position for black. Bishop takes c4, queen d1, I grab the rook, rook f to c8, and okay, I'm just up the exchange, and I still have a better position, so the rest is pretty easy, but still kind of nice, I think. All right, he played bishop to a4, activating the bishop and protecting the bishop on c3. I played bishop to d5, opening the c file, and of course I have nothing to worry about from his rook because the rook is hanging unless he goes back to b2, but bishop to b2 just doesn't do anything. So he played h3, which is probably as good an idea as any. And I like what I played here as well. So black to move, what to do? Okay, well the answer is queen c4. It's time to break into his position here. Break into his position and destroy some stuff. I'm threatening the pawn on a2. Of course I'm threatening the bishop on a4 as well, most importantly. And I'm also aiming to leap into the d3 square, where I'll either force more exchanges that are favorable while giving myself maybe a passed d pawn. And again, you're up at the exchange, trade pieces, gain space. What could be finer? All right, he plays bishop to b3. I play queen to d3. I'm happy to trade, especially if it gives me a passed pawn. And okay, my opponent's desperate at this point. I don't remember the time situation, but the board's bad enough. So he plays queen to b2, trying to avoid the exchange of queens without dropping the bishop on c3. But, okay, this is dropping more stuff. Queen e3 check, and now rook a to b8. So you should always be maximally sadistic in such positions. So you can just trade and win, but if you have the chance to just keep your opponent locked up, do it. So now I'm threatening, all of his pieces are really loose here. I'm threatening a4. And he can't just move his queen anywhere he wants to because he's got to keep the bishop protected. I've got it attacked twice, and he's got to keep the rook protected as well. So he's on the verge of collapse here. He played bishop to d1. I played rook takes c1 check. Here, of course, he has to play queen takes c1, and then I play queen takes d4, and life is good. But he made another mistake with bishop c1. Must have been in time pressure at this point because too strong a player to just drop things like this. So queen e1 check, king h2, a4, there goes another piece, bishop d2, queen f2, and now, in addition to his other woes, he's got to worry about e3, not only with pressure this way, but queen g2 mate. So queen c1, a takes b3, queen c7. I could have played e3 here, but okay, that's the move that you play if you're using a computer, not if you're a human being. So rook f8. Bishop to b4, and now I play e3, and white resigned. So I think this was a pretty nice game, good example of positional domination there on the queen side, and but also I think it's instructive in the opening. And so I've hopefully shown you a few interesting plans that you can use against the Kali and the Stonewall, and also on the other hand shown some problems with the plan that I chose. And or at least ways that white can try to combat that idea of putting the knight on e4 by playing queen f3, knight h3, and so on. So I hope you enjoyed this and also found it instructive. Speaking for myself, I always find it enjoyable when I see the Kali lose. Certainly this old Koltanowski version of the Kali. Since it always struck me that this opening and the Stonewall is the sort of opening that people who are extremely lazy play. And they tend to just play it over and over again. I mean, not even with any variance. So, there's nothing wrong with playing openings like this every now and then, but I don't know. It seems just such an unprincipled approach that I have kind of a bias against it. So, those of you who share that bias will probably really enjoy this game. Those of you who, in fact, play the Kali and Stonewall, I hope I haven't insulted you too much. I have nothing against the Zukertort Kali, so that I think, as an occasional weapon, is actually quite interesting. And if you play any of these openings occasionally, that's okay. But I think at a certain point, You should vary your openings and try to learn more principled openings, because I think you'll both enjoy the game more, and your opponents will enjoy it more just because they'll get a little variety. And also, though, I think you'll learn more about chess, and I think that's a big thing too. So you'll learn more. You'll have a bigger appreciation for more kinds of positions, and that can't but improve your game, and it'll also help you to enjoy when you watch top players playing as well. So hopefully I've extricated myself from whatever situation I've worked into, and I'll go ahead and close now. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out my blog, chessmind.powerblogs.com. Very heavy coverage of the World Chess Championship between Viswanathan Anand and Vladimir Kramnik, so I think you should check that out, and I think you'll like it. And with that, I'll close. So thanks a lot, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.